I never knew pain could wear pearls and smile in pictures. There I was, standing in front of my mirror with a dress I borrowed from the secondhand shop on Maple Street, trying to look like I belonged somewhere I hadn't been welcomed in years. My son Jaden sat on the edge of my bed, kicking his polished black shoes back and forth, a crooked grin on his face. He was excited. He thought this wedding meant we were part of something again. That maybe, just maybe, we were finally being brought back in from the cold. I wanted to believe that too. My name is Maya Cruz. I'm 34. I'm a single mom and the black sheep of the Cruz family. I work mornings in the kitchen of a public elementary school and pull evening shifts behind the desk at a local budget motel. It's not glamorous, but it's ours. I make pancakes on Sunday mornings. I know how to fix ripped knees on Jaden's jeans, and when his asthma acts up at 2 a.m., I don't blink. But to my family, I've always been the failure. When I got pregnant at 24, they didn't ask questions. My boyfriend disappeared. I stayed, and they turned their backs. My mother, Estella, said I chose struggle. My younger sister, Celeste? She got a degree, a marketing career, a beachfront condo, and a diamond the size of a grape. She never looked back. Until now. A week before the wedding, I got a card in the mail. Thick ivory paper, gold embossed lettering. The RSVP misspelled my name, Mia Cross, but I recognized the handwriting. Celeste. For a second, my heart jumped. The invitation didn't say much, just the when, where, and dress code, formal elegance. It didn't say we want you there, but I heard it anyway. I said yes. I told myself it was for Jaden. He was thrilled. He'd never been to a real wedding before. We went shopping at a thrift store to find him a little suit. I had to stretch 2 paychecks to get it altered in time. He looked so proud standing in front of the mirror. "Do I look like a gentleman, Mom?" he asked. I said, "No, better. You look like my son." The morning of the wedding, I curled my hair in the bathroom mirror with a cheap iron that smelled faintly of burnt plastic. I slid into the dark green gown that barely fit and fixed Jaden's tie of it for the 3rd time before we stepped into the cab. The venue was a vineyard estate in upstate New York. Grand gates, white hydrangeas, a string quartet playing beneath a tent. The guests were glossy and graceful, people who wore elegance like second skin. We found our names at table 12. I checked the seating chart twice. Back corner, near the kitchen. Of course. Celeste greeted me with a tight-lipped smile. "You made it," she said, like she hadn't expected I would. She glanced at Jaden. He's taller than I remember. No hug, no warmth, just an obligation fulfilled. Estella didn't even acknowledge me. She brushed past us on her way to the head table, clutching her pearls and a mimosa. Jaden didn't notice. He was too busy staring at the chandelier. "It looks like a spaceship," he whispered. I smiled because I didn't want to cry. We sat, we ate. We listened to clinking glasses and murmured compliments from people who barely remembered my name. Still, I told myself, maybe this is a start. Maybe this is the olive branch. But deep in my chest, the old ache settled. The one that said, "You're here, but not really." And as the music swelled and the laughter grew louder around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. I didn't know what, but I should have. The ceremony began right as the sun dipped low behind the vineyard hills. The whole scene looked like something out of a bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs on the lawn, flower petals scattered like confetti over the aisle, and Celeste gliding down it like she was born for this. She wore a custom satin gown with a veil that sparkled under golden light. Her smile was practiced, perfect, the kind that had been rehearsed for months, maybe years. The man waiting for her at the altar was Adrian Castillo, her fiancé. He looked like he belonged in a cologne ad, tall, sculpted, polished in every way. I watched them exchange vows from the 3rd row. Not because I was placed there, someone had double-booked our assigned seats. We ended up squeezed in next to a family of strangers, their little girl sticking her gum under the pew while Jaden whispered questions like, "Why is everyone crying when no one died?" I tried to laugh. I really did. After the kiss and thunder of applause, the guests moved toward the reception hall, a massive glass-walled room strung with Edison bulbs and draped in ivory fabric. As we stepped inside, I felt it again. That tightening in my chest. The ache. The quiet reminder that we didn't belong here. Our place? Table 12. In the farthest corner, right next to the swinging doors to the kitchen. Every time they opened, we were hit with a burst of hot air and the scent of onions and bleach. I tried not to let it show. Jaden was too amazed by the chandelier to notice, and I wanted it to stay that way. People passed our table without stopping. No greetings, no small talk. Some recognized me, did a double take, then moved on without a word. Celeste floated from table to table, glass in hand, camera following. She greeted her guests with kisses, posed like a politician working a donor room. Every photo was curated, every laugh just loud enough. When she finally reached us, it wasn't with joy. It was with obligation. "Maya," she said, then leaned down to straighten Jaden's tie. "You look nice. I didn't expect that color on you." "I didn't expect an invitation," I replied, keeping my smile tight. She laughed, but her eyes didn't. "Well, Adrian thought it was the right thing to do." And there it was. Not forgiveness, not family, just a public relations move. She turned to leave, then paused. "You don't have to stay for the speeches if it's too much." "Too much," I didn't answer. As the night stretched on, I helped Jaden wipe chocolate mousse from his jacket, made polite conversation with a tipsy aunt who thought I was a neighbor, and quietly endured the glances and whispers from across the room. Then the clinking of glasses began. The room hushed. Speeches. Adrian's best man was first. A string of mildly funny stories about college, hangovers, and loyalty. Nothing cruel. Just harmless nostalgia. The kind of speech that leaves people smiling. Then Celeste stood. Her dress shimmered under the reception lights, catching every eye in the room. She raised her champagne flute with the grace of royalty. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "It means the world to have you share this perfect day with us." I sat up a little straighter. She went on about Adrian, about fate, about their first date at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. The guests hung on every word, and then she shifted. "Before I sit down," she said, tilting her head toward our table, "I want to give a quick shout out to my older sister." A murmur rippled through the room. I felt dozens of eyes turn my way. "Maya has always been strong," she said with a half smile. "Raising a child on her own takes guts and determination, and I guess zero ability to hold on to a man." Laughter. I froze. The sound came in waves, some shocked, some amused, some hesitant. Celeste continued, "But hey, she made it here tonight. And she looks great for someone who's been living off microwave meals and child support for years." Another round of laughter. Sharper, meaner. Jaden looked up at me, confused. "Why did she say that, Mom?" he whispered. Before I could respond, my mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "She's a used product," Estella said loudly, clinking her glass. "But I'll give her credit. She polished up nicely tonight." More laughter, from people I had once called family. I sat there, my fingers clenched around the napkin in my lap, my face burning. I looked around, desperate for one pair of eyes to meet mine in kindness. My aunt stared at her wine. My cousin smiled into her phone. My grandfather blinked down at his untouched plate. Jaden leaned in closer, his voice trembling now. "Mom, are they laughing at you?" I couldn't lie. I couldn't hide. I couldn't breathe. But I wasn't going to cry. Not in front of my son. Not again. And something inside me began to shift. I didn't move. Couldn't. The laughter in the room felt like waves crashing against my skin. Cold, loud, merciless. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with the sheer force of holding them back. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this, not in front of Jaden. He looked at me wide-eyed and still. "Why did she say that? What did she mean?" he whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know how to explain to a 9-year-old boy that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you choose cruelty instead. That sometimes your own blood draws the deepest wounds. I looked around the room again. For someone. Anyone. No one met my gaze. Not Aunt Rosa, who used to braid my hair in the summers. Not Grandpa Emilio, who used to call me his little firecracker. Not even my childhood friend Mariah, now dressed in designer silk and sipping champagne 2 tables away. Every one of them stayed silent. Heads down, forks moving, glasses lifted to lips that smirked or said nothing at all. I wanted to run, to grab Jaden's hand and leave behind the music and wine and stares. I pictured the two of us walking down the long vineyard path, back to the dusty car we borrowed, leaving the fairy tale behind before it twisted any further. But my body wouldn't listen. Not yet. I couldn't breathe through the knot in my chest, couldn't swallow the burn rising in my throat. And then, just as I reached for Jaden's hand, a sound cut through the buzz of laughter and glasses. A chair scraped slowly against the floor. I turned. Adrian, the groom. He stood at the head table, tall and still, his champagne untouched. He didn't look at Celeste. He didn't look at Estella. His eyes were locked on me. The room stilled instantly, as if everyone sensed something was about to break. He picked up the mic from its stand. Not hurriedly, not with the charm he'd been praised for all night, but deliberately, like every second before he spoke mattered. "Maya," he said. My name, said clearly, not mangled or brushed aside. I froze. Adrian looked around the room, jaw tight, eyes sharp. I wasn't planning on saying anything more tonight. I thought the love we're here to celebrate would speak for itself. He paused. But what I'd just witnessed. He shook his head, voice low and even. That wasn't love. That wasn't family. A stunned hush fell across the guests. He turned slightly, just enough to glance at Celeste, who sat rigid in her chair, mouth open but silent. "You stood in front of your friends, your family, your child," he said, motioning gently toward me and Jaden, "and used your wedding speech to belittle a woman who showed up despite everything, who brought her son here to witness your big day with nothing but respect in her heart." No one moved. "You mocked her, and worse, you let your mother add to it." He turned to Estella. "And you? You said things no parent should ever say, and you laughed." A gasp. Someone dropped their fork. I clutched Jaden's hand. He was staring at Adrian like he was watching a superhero come to life. Adrian took a breath. If this is the version of family I'm marrying into, where we humiliate the strong and cheer for cruelty, then I need to reevaluate who I am and what I believe in. The silence in the room was deafening. Celeste finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Adrian, it was just a joke." He turned back to her. "No," he said softly. "It was a choice." He stepped out from the head table, walked toward us slowly, like he wasn't afraid of the eyes burning into his back. When he reached our table, he knelt slightly to meet Jaden's eye. "Your mom," he said, his voice warm now, "is the strongest person in this room. Don't ever forget that." Then he turned to me. "You didn't deserve that, and I won't be part of a celebration that treats you like less." He straightened, turned back to the crowd, and said, "I think I've seen enough." Without another word, Adrian set the microphone down, walked past Celeste without so much as a glance, and exited through the glass doors into the vineyard night. No one followed. No one clapped. No one even breathed. Jaden looked up at me. "Is it over?" I nodded slowly, not sure what to call what had just happened. But deep inside, something in me, something that had been cracked for years, shifted. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel broken. For a moment, the reception hall was completely still. No music, no murmurs. Just a stunned silence that hummed louder than any applause ever could. The fairy tale had cracked wide open, and the shards were scattered across the glossy marble floor. Celeste remained frozen at the head table, her champagne flute hovering mid-air like even gravity had abandoned her. Her cheeks were pale beneath her makeup, and her smile, always perfectly placed, was gone. Someone near the front coughed. A wine glass clinked against porcelain. But no one said anything. Until my mother stood. Her chair screeched back as she rose abruptly, indignation carved into every wrinkle on her face. "What an ungrateful boy," Estella snapped, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. He embarrassed you in front of everyone, just like your sister always does. Selfish, both of them. But something was different this time. No one nodded. No one echoed her anger. Her words, usually so sharp, so unquestioned, fell flat against the silence. They sounded smaller now, petty. And for the first time in my life, they didn't land. I stood, not in shame, not in panic. I didn't rush. I didn't run. I simply rose, smoothed the fabric of my dress with trembling hands, and looked down at Jaden. He looked up at me with wide, steady eyes. "Are we leaving?" he asked softly. "Yes, baby," I whispered, brushing a lock of hair behind his ear. "We're going home." We turned toward the doors, and something unexpected happened. People began to part. A subtle ripple moved through the room as guests stepped aside, allowing us through like they suddenly remembered how doors worked. I didn't look at their faces, couldn't bear to see either pity or regret, but I felt the shift. Some avoided my eyes, some looked like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Halfway to the exit, I heard my name. "Maya." I turned. It was my grandfather, Emilio. His pale eyes, always so sharp, were rimmed red. He stood slowly, gripping the back of his chair for support. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough and shaking. "I should have stopped it years ago." I nodded. I couldn't speak. Not because I was holding back anger, but because I understood. Silence comes with a cost. He had paid his price, I had paid mine. But I wouldn't carry his guilt anymore. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. The vineyard lights blinked in the distance. Crickets chirped like they had no idea a war had just ended inside. Jaden squeezed my hand. "Is the wedding really over?" I looked down at him, this little boy in an oversized suit with chocolate on his cuff and truth in his eyes. "Yeah," I said softly. "I think it ended exactly how it needed to." We got in the car. No music, no words, just the hum of tires against asphalt and the faint tap-tap-tap of Jaden's fingers on the armrest. Back at the apartment, I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and lingered in the doorway longer than usual. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. That night, as I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing my borrowed dress, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how many years I'd spent walking into rooms just to be made to feel smaller. Not anymore. Not after tonight. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. Dozens of missed calls, some from numbers I didn't recognize, a few from cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade. I ignored them all. Until a text came through. From a coworker. "Someone recorded Adrian's speech. It's on Facebook. 60,000 views already. You need to see the comments." I opened the link, and there it was. Me, frozen in the frame, holding Jaden's hand, and Adrian standing like a soldier, like a shield, calling out an entire room. The comments flooded in. "This man is a legend. To every single mom who's ever been humiliated, this one's for you." I'm crying. She deserved better. He gave her that. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt still, like something that had been clenched inside me for years had finally let go. And I breathed. A few days after the wedding, a small bouquet showed up at my apartment door. Nothing extravagant, just a handful of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. No signature, no explanation. But the card tucked into the blooms said everything. To the lioness. I didn't need to wonder who it was from. It wasn't just a gesture. It was recognition. It was someone saying, "I saw you. And I saw what they did. And you didn't flinch." Celeste never reached out. There was no apology, no attempt to explain the speech or the laughter or the cruelty that hung in the air like expensive perfume. She did what she's always done. Posted a heavily filtered photo of herself on a balcony the next morning, captioned, "Bouncing back." There was no mention of Adrian, no announcement of the broken engagement, no statement, no closure, just silence. But this time, the silence didn't belong to me. Estella called once, She didn't apologize either. Her voice, always so precise and polished, sounded strained, forced. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You embarrassed your sister. You humiliated our family, all because you couldn't take a joke." I let her talk for 30 seconds. Then, for the first time in my life, I said something I had never dared to say. "I'm not your scapegoat anymore." Then I hung up. Not in anger, not in revenge, just clarity and freedom. Life didn't magically transform after that. I still work long hours. I still stretch every paycheck. I still fold Jaden's socks in the hallway light while he sleeps with one hand curled under his cheek. But something inside me is different. I no longer enter rooms apologetically. I don't smile through shame. I don't chase permission to feel like I matter. I walk taller now, not because the world has changed, but because I have. Even Jaden has changed. He talks about Adrian like he's a Marvel superhero. Sometimes he reenacts the wedding speech with his action figures lined up like wedding guests. Once, I caught him standing on the coffee table with his toy microphone. He looked at me and declared, "Nobody makes fun of my mom. Not in my house." I laughed, but I also had to step into the hallway for a second. My heart wasn't ready for the way it swelled. He's watching, always. And that night, he saw something that will shape who he becomes. Strong, gentle, brave. One evening, while we were brushing our teeth, Jaden looked at me through the mirror. "Are you still sad about what Aunt Celeste said?" I paused, rinsed my toothbrush, and looked at him through the reflection. "Not anymore." "Why?" He shrugged, toothpaste on his chin. "Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight." That stayed with me. Because he was right. I didn't throw a drink, I didn't yell, I didn't make a scene. I didn't beg for kindness that should have been freely given. I stood up. I held my son's hand. I walked out. And someone else, someone unexpected, decided that silence wasn't enough anymore. Adrian didn't just stand up for me. He reminded everyone in that room what love is supposed to look like. Not performative, not polished, not smiling through cruelty. Real love steps in when no one else will. Real love says, "No, not today." It's been 6 months since that night. The video of Adrian's speech continues to circulate. It's been posted on parenting blogs, shared in women's groups, quoted in comments beneath single mom support threads. I don't read all the messages, but every now and then, one will stop me cold. "Thank you for showing me I don't have to take it anymore. Your strength gave me permission to walk away too. You reminded me that I'm not alone." That's the thing I didn't realize back then. The moment I stopped shrinking, I didn't just free myself. I lit a path. So no, I didn't dance at my sister's wedding. I didn't raise a glass. I didn't cry under fairy lights or toss a bouquet. But I walked away with something better than approval. I walked away with my dignity, my son's hand in mine, and a quiet, solid truth no one can take from me again. I do not need to explain who I am to anyone. Not anymore.